Let's get a quick take on how Pope Francis's comments about Donald Trump's desire to build a wall on the Mexican border and Trump's response is affecting the presidential circus. Patty Cahoon from Westward. The only thing we were missing in this whole campaign was a pontiff, and just like a gift from the heavens, here we are.
I know, and that's what I was going to say. You know, when we had talked about who was going to be the new pope the last time on the show, I said, oh, you know, who cares? Now, could we have a more, and we couldn't have a more entertaining presidential candidate, and now we could not have a more entertaining pope. There's some discrepancy on what he actually said, but I would say he should have been a little more Christian in how he said it.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. Trump has not been afraid to offend anyone, so I can't imagine he's afraid to go after the Pope here. Do you think there's going to be some after effects from his comments?
The after effect, we see the effects now. We actually had like several minutes on television when Donald Trump wasn't the main story, and Pope Francis stepped in and ruined that. You know, holy hypocrisy, Pope Francis. You are the head of state. You've got a UN delegation in your state. It's surrounded by a giant wall. It's a huge wall. It's bigger than the wall Trump would build. And you build it, you have it, as popes in their city-state have for centuries, to keep out people you don't want to come in. The Vatican City has the most restrictive immigration policy in the world. Way more restrictive than the United States, even more restrictive than Mexico, which is extremely tough. If he wants to set a good example, instead of wagging his finger at Americans, how about you take in some of those Syrian refugees or Mexican job seekers? You know, the Vatican City's small, but they could build a giant apartment tower in it, 35 stories tall if they wanted to, house some of the world's displaced. Why don't you take the mote out of your own eye, take the beam out of your eye before you go around picking on our motes?
I would, you know, as a visitor to St. Peter's Square just a few months ago, I think there's a little easier to visit. Maybe not immigrate to the Vatican, but a little bit easier to visit than it would be to come across a Trump wall.
Nobody's stopping Mexican tourists from coming into this country.
Let's keep it rolling. Penfield Tate, attorney with QTAC Rock, longtime state lawmaker. We have a pretty big support, both with Catholics and non-Catholics, for Pope Francis. Is that going to affect any Trump supporters, or is that a non-factor?
I don't know if it'll affect any Trump supporters. It won't matter in South Carolina because South Carolina is, what, 3% Catholic and 97% something else? So they probably are pleased with the fact that Trump took on the Pope. It's kind of interesting, just the parallels, because this Pope up to this point has been known for being outspoken, non-conventional, and addressing and confronting issues in the church kind of head on, and challenging the church and those in the believers of the faith in terms of challenging some of their thoughts and opinions and traditions. And so I don't think in many ways, as Patty pointed out, it's not a surprise that he called this out. He's been calling out a lot of people on a lot of different things. But in his typical fashion, Donald Trump overreacted bombastically, intentionally, because he's getting the desired effect. That's all everybody's talking about, is now Donald's going after the Pope. I think it's just another brick in the wall of logic building against Donald Trump, that people question his temperament and really his capacity and capability to be the commander-in-chief of this country. He's making the best argument against his own candidacy. That'll build over time.
Ed Sealer from the Denver Business Journal, wrap it up for us.
First, Donald Trump makes the argument that the government should lead the efforts to discriminate against a particular religion in Muslims, and Paul Ryan rightly calls him out for not understanding the term conservative. Now, at a time when other presidential candidates are discussing the idea of a twofold strategy, one being let's secure our borders, but let's also help the people that want to come into this country, Donald Trump rightly gets called out by the Pope for not being Christian, because all he's saying is hate, 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 not, hey, how do we balance this out? And he acts like something is surprising here. I'll tell you what term he does understand, though: narcissism.